This is the story of the return to my roots and how I'm bringing my childhood's homestead back to life. Of all the places I have lived, this is by far where my fondest memories are from. I lived here with my grandparents from birth until I was 4 years old, when they left this house. It was around 50 years ago when my grandparents moved from here. Their children had already flown off the nest. The electric grid had just been installed in the area, and the house needed a lot of repairs. Instead of repairing and upgrading it, they built a new small 2-bedroom house close by in the village and moved there. After that, we still came here all the time. I remember it clearly. Even after moving in with my parents when I was 6 years old, I came to spend summers with them. My grandfather would still make the wine here and keep it in the cellar, and my grandmother still sowed her crops here. As expected, during my teenage years, I didn't set foot here. And then, when I was 18, my parents moved the family to Canada. Already in my 20s, when I was living in Canada and started visiting Portugal, without fail, every time on any random day, I'd mindlessly end up in this old abandoned place. That same nostalgia that lured me back here also ignited a dream. The dream of one day restoring it to its former glory. At first, I dreamed about the fun that it would be to restore my childhood playground. Then, renovate the home of my early days. Repair the things that my grandparents used. Make the land productive again. To grow food traditionally just like my grandmother did. Grow grapes, make wine naturally just like my grandpa made. Live an active lifestyle, mostly off of the land, so I can honor their work and my heritage onwards. Some will say that you set the intentions. Well, the stars did align and the time did come. And that was just over a year ago, on the wintry morning of the 2nd of January. Packed with an abundance of enthusiasm and a methodical plan, a plan I had been working on for years, I was finally here. Ready and eager to get on it. The first task was dealing with the results of 5 decades of neglect. This once productive piece of land was quickly being reclaimed by nature. If it hadn't been for the neighbor's sheep, the property would have turned into a forest. Clearing the massive overgrowth and opening the land back up was a substantial job. Luckily, I had my son's help for a good while. We worked hard to save everything the land had for us as a resource. We saved enough firewood for one winter, chipped enough brush to pave the future garden paths, and collected enough rocks to build a retaining wall. Determined not to waste anything, while we couldn't cut, chip, or shred, we used to start a compost pile. Run down was also all the grapevine supporting infrastructure. Some of it is being repaired, some replaced, and some removed to open up land for crop growing. Unfortunately, I had to take down 2 mature chestnut trees that had grown too close to the house and would endanger it. On the right side, the biggest of them had a solid trunk, something apparently not so common. I had it taken to the village sawmill. We cut it into good-sized slabs that we are drying, and I'm planning to make furniture for the house with it. No part of it went to waste. Even the root stump was saved. As far as essential infrastructure goes, we never had a water well. The public water spring is on the very edge of our land, so my grandparents would just go there to fetch the water for their needs. But I remember my grandfather telling me how water would be found in this one spot in the property. There used to be one particular water-loving plant right there. He would tell me, water will be found here. I told this to the well digger, and sure enough, that's where the water is. After securing a reliable source of own water, my priority became erecting an auxiliary outbuilding, a place where we could keep the tools and materials needed during the renovation and beyond. It had to be centrally located and multi-purpose, with multi-purpose being the main design criteria item. The central location was relatively easy to find, only requiring some excavation to create a flat level area. And as soon as we found reliable help, we started building it. Easily the most important piece of support infrastructure that we can have. Built around the multifunction principle, it will replace several smaller structures that are commonly found in most homesteads. It's 110 square meters or 1,200 square feet, cost-effective, simple design, yet very solid, that we divided into 4 separate areas. One such area is mostly dedicated to the electricity generating system. It will house the battery bank, the inverters, and all other related hardware. Right next to the power room, will be the workshop, the place where rainy winter days will be spent on special projects. The third and last indoor separate area is what would replace a fairly good-sized garden shed. The fourth space is exterior and has to do with livestock. Restoring the homestead means also bringing back animals beyond the dog and the cat. With that in mind, the side of the outbuilding facing the land has a covered space divided into 5 separate areas that will house different species of livestock, from egg-laying chicken to rabbits. The first space to be developed was the hen house for the egg layers. I designed it so I won't have to go in it except to add bedding and remove the manure a couple of times per year. And until we are ready to take in the next family of animals, these outdoor spaces will be temporary storage. There's also additional storage space out behind the building for extra materials and larger equipment. Putting the land back to work efficiently requires well-thought support infrastructure. My plan was all along to develop that before having the house rebuilt. As part of the project, and while we had the excavator over for other work, we dug a pond for the future ducks. We also fenced the bird run area, utilizing repurposed stone posts from the old grapevine pergolas that we disassembled. And we installed the newly fabricated gates using also stone posts. Rebuilding the only covered space that my grandparents had outside of the house was something I was looking forward to. I have many great memories of this spot. This is where my grandfather had his carpenter's workbench, where I'd admire his tools and watch him at his craft. This is also where he fermented the grapes during winemaking season. The grandest stone base wine press sat in the corner. I remember vividly pulling on the heavy iron crank to help press the must. The oxen cart was stored under here too. Be kept away from the weather, with his bicycle always leaning on it. It required quite a bit of work. There wasn't much more than most of the back wall and one of the corner posts. I worked hard to rebuild it to the original specifications as much as possible, including local pine lumber from the village sawmill. Help from one of the guys here, and it was so satisfying to eventually make my own woodworking bench and place it in the exact same spot that my grandfather had his. As a little boy, I could hardly reach the top of it. I was now able to see the valley from this very spot. And making wine under it for the first time in many decades. That brought back so many wonderful memories. Something that I know that my grandfather wanted to build here but didn't get around to is a water tank for irrigation. Knowing that, and also knowing that it makes complete sense, I just had to build it. Using common designs from that period and the same construction materials, I placed it where I'm confident he would too, at the highest elevation of the whole property, right next to the house. Keep in mind that they were also used as clothes washing tanks back in the day. Built out of granite slabs, it holds 24,000 liters of water that will be used to water the garden, all the fruit trees, and the new future vineyard, all by gravity. Well, we won't be using it to wash clothes, but I suspect that it may get another use during some very hot summer days. With all that basic infrastructure work out of the way, it was time to work on the house. Removing the vegetation that had been growing in the stone wall joint for many decades was no quick job. Ivy vines thicker than one's wrist, in some places like fused to the stone, slowly braided by the seasons, in relentless pursuit of the sun. and brambles, thorny brambles, in some places as thick as a blanket that was there to keep the flat granite walls from anyone's touch. 50 years ago, my grandparents decided on a new house instead of updating this one. I feel as if they left it for me to repair and update. And I'm confident that they would approve of what I'm doing to it. Exposing these 250-year-old walls back to the bare stone allowed me to remember things that I had long forgotten. With the cleanup operation well underway and the guys done on the outbuilding, we started on more serious stone wall work. The first job and an opportunity for me to better understand the dynamics of structural stone wall construction, we rebuilt the double-faced wall connecting the house to the side road wall. And created a new side entrance gate. Some years ago, the municipality widened the roadway in front of the house and changed the grade, causing the front wall to be buried much more than it used to. Because of that, we decided to waterproof that wall so that humidity wouldn't be an issue along those walls. With harvest season quickly approaching, it became imperative to work on the cellar. What used to be the sheep barn is now going to be the new wine and root vegetable cellar. Most of the work here was about preparing the wall and resurfacing the original step between the ground and upper floor. It needed to be smooth and level to accept the reinforced concrete joists. Next, we disassembled the main entrance lintel so we could raise it to the level of the two-story structure. This would also improve the height versus width proportions of the door opening that were damaged during the improvement work done to the roadway by the municipality 25 years ago. João had to make new multi-faced stones for the job. He is a master. Such big lintels can be fragile. We had to be extremely careful when reinstalling them. I can't even imagine how these two enormous stones were originally installed some 200 years ago. I will admit that removing the wall between the house and the old cellar in order to open up space was an emotional affair. But it was worth it. Moving the cellar to the old animal barn and removing this wall that was between it and the house really opened up the space. We can now pretty much fit the kitchen, the washroom, a small pantry, and a small mechanical room in what used to be the old wine cellar. I found my grandma's old bread oven, neatly tucked in a corner, protected by all those thorny brambles. I took it apart piece by piece. It's safe, and I will be putting it back together somewhere else. As soon as all that stone was off to the side and sorted out, it was time to start raising the old cellar wall. The cellar had been an addition to the house. It was deeper in the ground to stay cool and with a much lower roof line. The door side of the cellar, which was in very bad shape, was totally rebuilt without the door opening, but with a new window for the kitchen. The rest of the cellar wall was raised to match the height of the house. It was around this time that I noticed that the guys were finally understanding my vision for the house and how committed they were to doing a good job. We then built the retaining wall for the higher section of the future wraparound patio. It was a matter of extending the existing courtyard wall from its end at a 90-degree angle. It matches it perfectly as if it had always been there. Sometimes we have to take something down before putting something else up. As the case with a piece of the courtyard wall. It needed to come down to make room for the new wall that will connect the two existing structures. This new wall will have the third exterior door of the house. This door will lead to the courtyard, and it will be the closest one to the parking area. This way, we can also enter directly into the cellar without going through the rest of the house. When we are bringing in the wine barrels, the potatoes, and everything else that we are going to store in the cellar. Next will be the stone wall that will match the rest of the house. This project's about much more than restoring an old stone house. This is about restoring a bygone, much more sustainable way of life. And for that, making the land productive again is absolutely essential. Some years ago, I secretly started replanting the same fruit trees that my grandparents had here when I was a child. This at a time when there was no certainty that the property would end up on my side of the family. So far, I have planted 27 new fruit and nut trees here. Establishing a garden early on was a priority. With all hands on deck, we set up 20 garden beds that can be expanded lengthwise later on. We planted just about everything that will grow in this climate, with some failures and some successes as a result. Bringing animals back to the homestead and raising them like my grandparents did means growing the feed in-house. Around here, corn is historically the main source of feed, at least for the last 400 or so years. Luckily, a good friend still grows traditional non-hybrid corn and spared enough to get me going. The harvest could have been better, but it's a good start. I am glad to report that not only do our chicken love it, it also makes a great traditional cornbread called broa. Thank you for watching this far. I hope you enjoyed the fly over my village and that you enjoyed this short summary of what happened here on my project until the end of last year. Lots more happened here. I live here. There's a lot going on. I try to show a little bit of everything that's going on, not just building or rebuilding the house. I try to show what my motivations are. I hope that comes across, what my process is. I love the idea that what I do motivates people. I do get a lot of comments that speak to that effect. I have to say that I myself have been motivated by other creators and their projects, including just recently I realized how one of my commenters is in fact the person responsible for me moving out of the city some 12 years ago. Her project spoke to me. It essentially told me not to be afraid and go and do what was in my heart. I'm deeply honored that she watches some of my videos and comments. So yeah, if what I do speaks to you, please make a comment, say something, ask questions. I try to answer. Bear with me, sometimes I don't, but I try. Going forward, it'll be more of the same. I will post every Sunday. I'll publish my video every Sunday, sometimes a little earlier than 11, but I try to do it by 11 o'clock local here. Some videos take a little longer to edit for technical reasons. I do it all by myself, so if I speak a lot on my videos, it complicates things. It really, really adds a lot of work. I know YouTube now is working on a feature that will dub the video into some languages, into several languages. I think my last video was already dubbed to some languages. Of course, it doesn't sound like me, but the dubbing is actually not bad. It's a new feature. Maybe to some people it's important. I know the Portuguese speakers always wish I spoke more Portuguese. Maybe there's something there for them. I hope it works. I hope to hear from you. I know a lot more people watch my videos sometimes than they are subscribed. It'd be great if they subscribed. Maybe give me a like if you enjoy my videos. And yes, thank you once again. I will see you next week.